Karen encounter story. A few weeks ago I, 39M, was on a work trip and went to a restaurant to get a meal at a casual-type local place. Since I had a few hours to kill, I decided to dine in rather than get takeout. It was early afternoon, and the place was around 60% full. The hostess seated me out of two top. Before I even sat down, I asked her for directions to the restroom so I could wash my hands before eating. I left my ball cap/hat on top of the menu on the table, mainly so any server would know someone was seated. After the 2 minutes it took me go wash my hands, I returned and found my table and one of the two chairs gone, my hat and the menu included. I turned around to look for a server when I noticed that a nearby booth had a two-top table with one chair pulled up to it. There were 5 people seated, and only one at the two-top. On the floor a few feet away, I noticed my hat. When I approached to pick up my hat, I asked the people sitting there if they had moved the table. A woman in the booth, let's go ahead and call her Karen, responded that a friend showed up so they needed a larger or additional table and that this one wasn't being used. I responded that I had been seated there and was using it, and had left my hat on the table to indicate that while I washed my hands. She responded that there was no hat on the table. When I asked how my hat ended up on the floor, picking it up and pointing to it, next to her table, she said she never saw it at that point. I noticed a waiter, so I gestured for him to come over. I explained that this party moved my table over to their booth. I said I had no problem if they wanted to use one of the chairs for their additional guest, but that I would need the table. Karen cut me off at the end and said to me, not the waiter, that I should just find another table since they were already using it. I responded to the waiter that I was using it, which was why I had left my hat there while I washed my hands. At this point the other woman who was sitting at my table started to get to, presumably to give me the table back, but Karen immediately said, "Don't you dare," to her, then stared at me and the waiter as if daring either of us to respond. The waiter started to say he was sure they could find her another table. She cut him off with a typical Karen response, "We are not giving up the table, and I need to speak to your manager." This is when I decided I really liked the waiter and would give him a nice tip. He responded that he wasn't going to waste his manager's time on a complaining Karen, and told her the options were to give me back the table to go eat somewhere else. I'm not sure how, but it worked, except for the staring daggers and muttered comments which I found amusing. She did not appreciate my periodic smirk or chuckle in response. Looking back, I maybe could have just moved, but I also assumed it was an innocent mistake until Karen opened her mouth and hit me with that patented attitude.